The metallic clang of boots echoed through the high-walled command hall of the Vigilant Star, a state-of-the-art Accord warship orbiting the disputed neutral zone. Captain Cale Thorne stood at parade rest, his posture rigid, blue-gray eyes fixed on the illuminated holomap floating between him and Admiral Corvin. The room buzzed faintly with power from embedded systems, holographic screens, intelligence feeds, and concealed defense nodes. But the tension hanging between the two men was heavier than any electronic hum. "This isn't just another escort assignment," the Admiral said, his voice rough from too many wars and too little peace. "You're to guard Lady Sira Valari, heir to the Valari clans of Salrian." Cale's jaw clenched slightly. "A Vulpine noble? Not just any noble. Her people haven't taken sides in the war. But if the Dominion succeeds in removing her, the Valari alliance will fracture, and their neutrality will crumble. If that happens, Saurian's fleet joins the Dominion." "You understand what that means?" "I do," Cale replied evenly. He wasn't the kind of man to question orders out loud. Still, this was far from his usual recon or surgical strike detail. Corvin's stare sharpened. "You'll be with her constantly. You'll sleep in the same quarters. Eat in the same room. And you will not leave her side under any circumstance. She cannot be alone, not even for a minute." "Understood, sir." Corvin gave a curt nod. "Her personal shuttle is arriving in 30 minutes. Docking Bay 6. Cale saluted, turned on his heel, and strode from the chamber, his thoughts already racing. Protecting a civilian, no, a princess, wasn't his usual terrain. But he would follow the mission. He always did. Down in the docking bay, the tension shifted. The sound of machinery and orders being barked faded to a low hum as the sleek obsidian and gold vessel of the Saurian Royal Line descended onto the landing pad. Steam hissed from the ramp as it lowered. Out of the mist stepped Lady Sira Valari. She was unlike anything Cale expected. Towering and lithe, her orange fur shimmered like firelight beneath the bay's sterile illumination. Her figure, wrapped in ceremonial violet cloth accented with deep bronze cords, was both commanding and alluring. A regal circlet of hammered gold gleamed between her vulpine ears, which twitched once before angling toward him. Her tail, long, thick, and plush, swept behind her like a living sash. She was elegance and wildness woven into a single figure. Her eyes, the color of molten amber, locked onto his. "You are the Accord's offering of protection?" she asked coolly, her voice a silk blade. Cale stepped forward and bowed slightly. "Captain Cale Thorne, your ladyship. I've been assigned to ensure your safety." Her gaze narrowed, assessing him. Her furred arms crossed, the bracelets at her wrists jingling softly. "Let us hope your usefulness matches your grim expression." Cale didn't flinch. "You'll find I take my work seriously." A smile danced briefly across her sharp muzzle. "Then you might live long enough to impress me." Without waiting for reply, she turned, her tail flicking with purpose. Cale fell into step behind her, the scent of wildflowers and ozone trailing in her wake. This wasn't just going to be a long mission. It was going to be a dangerous one. Cale's quarters were far from luxurious, even by military standards. One narrow bunk, a reinforced desk, a compact storage locker, and a private wash station no larger than a closet. But it was deep within the ship's inner hull, where shield layering and structural support made it the safest possible chamber short of the brig. When Sira stepped through the sliding door, she froze. Her ears twitched once. Slowly, her gaze swept across the utilitarian space. Her nose crinkled in distaste. "This is a containment cell with curtains," she muttered, brushing her furred fingers along the metallic wall. "Do all your honored guests sleep atop iron slabs and surrounded by recycled air scrubbers?" Cale set down his field pack beside the desk. "It's not meant to impress. It's meant to protect. And yes, this is where we'll both be staying." Sira turned sharply, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim lighting. "Both? I've been ordered to guard you without exception. I don't leave your side unless I'm dead. That includes sleeping quarters." The silence that followed was thick. Her tail flicked once behind her. "Then you'll sleep on the floor." Kale didn't flinch. I'll take the chair. You can have the bed. Her eyes narrowed again, but something shifted in her expression, less irritation, more scrutiny. You're serious. You won't even argue the point. I don't argue with the people I'm protecting. She studied him, arms folded. The flowing sleeves of her garments swayed as she moved toward the viewport. Beyond the thick glass, the stars twinkled in unison, cold and unmoved by their tension. You're rigid, she said at last. Like a blade held too tight in a warrior's grip. Useful, but brittle. Kale sat in the chair, unbuckled his sidearm, and set it within arm's reach on the desk. If I break, it won't be while I'm on duty. Sarah looked at him sideways, the faintest curve tugging at one corner of her mouth. Not quite a smile, but not disdain either. We'll see. The hours passed in silence. Kale remained at his post, unmoving, while Sarah occupied the bed like it was a throne. She hadn't removed her outer garments, merely draped her tail neatly across the side and stared at the stars for what felt like forever. Eventually, her voice broke the silence. You didn't ask, she said quietly. Kale looked up. Ask what? Why me? Why I'm so important to your people? Kale didn't answer right away. He rose, stretched his arms, then walked to stand near the viewport, not too close. Just near enough. You're the only heir to the Valari matriarchy. If you die, your planet fractures. Your neutrality ends. And that tips the war. Sarah nodded slowly. That's what they told you. But that's not why they need me alive. Kale raised a brow. No? They're afraid, she said, her voice taking on a strange softness. Of what happens when a generation with nothing left to lose takes power. I'm not just an heir, Kale. I'm the final gate between order and collapse. She turned then, her amber eyes catching the faint starlight. So tell me, Captain Thorne, who protects you, while you protect me? Kale looked at her, uncertain how to answer. No one, he said finally. That's not part of the job. Pity, Sarah said, curling her legs beneath her, the shimmer of her gown catching the light like a flame. You're going to need it. Outside the walls of their steel room, danger moved unseen. But inside, something else had begun to shift. Slow and quiet, like gravity turning its gaze to pull two worlds together. The alarms came without warning. Kale was already half awake in his chair when the red emergency lights blinked to life. A sharp tone shrieked through the ship's corridors, followed by the curt voice of the bridge officer over the intercom. Security breach. Deck 4. Possible infiltration. All officers to alert stations. Kale was on his feet in seconds, pulling on his flak jacket and snapping his sidearm into place. He turned toward Sarah, who had already sat up on the bunk, the glow in her amber eyes brightening with alarm. What's happening? She asked, voice low but steady. Infiltration team. Possibly Dominion operatives. Stay behind me. Sarah rose smoothly, barefoot but poised. She pulled a dark cloak from her pack, not ceremonial, but armored, and fastened it across her shoulders. Her tail flicked behind her in controlled tension. I don't hide, she said sharply. Kale turned, his voice like iron. You do today. He keyed the door manually, disabling its auto-open. The corridor beyond was awash in flashing red, the overhead lights cycling in patterns designed to confuse enemy targeting systems. Kale checked his comm unit. Bridge, this is Thorne. I have the asset. Requesting status and secure route to fallback zone. A burst of static. Route compromised, the reply crackled. Multiple contacts moving toward the royal quarters. Recommend reroute to engineering junction. Bravo corridor is green, for now. Kale tapped a map onto his wrist display. New plan. We go through the maintenance deck. Stay low. Don't fall behind. Sarah nodded. No more protests. They moved quickly through the narrow hallways, Kale sweeping ahead with weapon raised. Behind him, Sarah moved with astonishing grace for someone used to tight, militarized spaces. Her movements were silent, fluid, an echo of her people's wild ancestry. The ship groaned under the pressure of internal breach systems activating. Bulkhead sealed. Lights flickered. Somewhere distant, gunfire echoed like thunder in a cave. As they rounded a corner, Cale's instincts screamed. He pushed Sarah hard, slamming her against the wall, just as the plasma bolt cut through the air where her head had been. Dominion operatives. 2 of them, armored, masked, precise. Cale returned fire instantly, 3 controlled bursts from his pistol. 1 attacker dropped, a smoking hole where his visor had been. The second ducked behind a support beam, returning fire with blistering speed. Cale turned his head. Move! Sarah ducked beneath him and sprinted down the hallway, her cloak catching light like embers. Cale laid down covering fire, then pivoted and ran behind her. Another shot grazed the wall near his shoulder, burning a streak across the steel. When they reached the junction to engineering, he slammed the panel and keyed in the override. The door didn't open. Of course, he muttered. Behind them, footsteps pounded closer. Sarah stepped beside him, her hands glowing faintly as she placed her palm against the locked console. A second later, the panel blinked green. The door hissed open. Cale stared at her. You can override a core tech? I'm not a helpless diplomat, she said breathlessly. I've been preparing for this since I was a child. They rushed through the hatch as more shots rang out behind them. Cale turned in the doorway and fired again, catching the second operative in the leg. He went down with a howl. The hatch slammed shut. They were alone. In the silence that followed, Cale's chest heaved as he slowly lowered his weapon. Sarah leaned against the wall, catching her breath. Her ears flicked once. Her fur was scorched along one edge, where the near miss had come too close. You saved my life, she said quietly. Cale looked at her, his voice rough. That's my job. Sarah stepped closer, her eyes searching his. No. You didn't hesitate. You threw yourself between me and a plasma bolt. He didn't speak. Why? She asked. His answer was barely a whisper. I don't know anymore. The aftermath of the breach spread through the Vigilant Star like invisible fire. The Dominion had underestimated the crew's response time, and most of their infiltration team had been neutralized or captured within minutes. But the message was clear: this wouldn't be the last attempt. Cale's commendation was delivered via a silent nod from Admiral Corvin and a curt mention in the ship's log. But it was what wasn't said that troubled him more. They were watching him now. He could feel it in the glances of junior officers, in the way ship security gave him just a fraction too much space. No accusations yet. But suspicion needed only a whisper to become wildfire. Back in his quarters, the air was tense. Sarah sat on the edge of the bunk, her fur freshly brushed and still smoldering slightly with the scent of sterilization cream. She had taken the bolt graze without complaint, but Cale had noticed the way her hand trembled when she thought he wasn't looking. You've been quiet, she said, breaking the silence. Cale didn't look up from the datapad. You almost died. I've almost died many times. Her tone was flippant, but her tail curled inward at the memory. It's not the death that frightens me. It's being useless before it happens. He set the datapad down with a clatter. You're not useless. You kept your head. You unlocked a military override like it was nothing. Hell, you probably saved me. Sarah tilted her head. Her orange ears perked. So why do you look like the world ended? Cale stood, pacing near the viewport. The stars outside were still, but his thoughts spun like a maelstrom. Because it's not just about keeping you alive anymore. That made her pause. You mean the mission? She asked. No, he said, turning to face her. I mean you. The person. Not the title. Not the heir. Just you. Sarah's expression flickered, first guarded, then something softer. She stood slowly, moving toward him, her feet bare on the steel floor. The fur on her legs shifted like velvet as she walked. I didn't think you saw me like that, she said. You make it hard not to. She stopped inches from him, close enough that her scent, Wildflowers, ozone, and something distinctly hers, clouded his thoughts. "I'm forbidden," she whispered. "I'm already damned." He didn't know which one of them moved first. Maybe it didn't matter. All he knew was the press of her body against his, the way her claws grazed lightly against the fabric of his shirt, not threatening, just present. Her tail curled around his legs slowly. Her lips met his, softer than he imagined, yet demanding. Her muzzle was warm, the fur at her jawline brushing against his stubble. He didn't pull away. Couldn't. For one stolen moment, Cale Thorne let the walls crack. Let duty fade. Let the war disappear. And all that remained was the press of Sarah Valari against him, a living fire he could no longer keep at arm's length. When they finally parted, her forehead rested against his chest. "This is madness," she murmured. "Yeah," he breathed, wrapping his arms around her. "But it's the only thing that feels real." The knock came 5 minutes later. Cale froze. Sarah's ears swiveled toward the sound. The voice that followed was unmistakable. "Captain Thorne? It's Commander Larrick. We need to talk. Privately." Cale's blood turned cold. It had begun. Cale opened the door slowly, his face composed, but the tension behind his eyes unmistakable. Commander Larrick stood in the corridor, hands clasped behind his back, the posture of a man pretending he wasn't there to interrogate. His uniform was sharp, his silver insignia catching the hallway light like a blade. Behind him, 2 junior officers stood at casual attention, too casual. "We've received intel the Dominion's breach team may have had inside help," Larrick said evenly, his voice devoid of any warmth. "The Admiral wants a full review of all command-level access logs, particularly those near your location during the incursion." Cale kept his tone level. "Understood, Commander. But I didn't exactly have time to share coordinates during the firefight. No one's accusing you, yet." Larrick gave a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Still, your proximity to the target, and the fact you deviated from the original fallback route, raises questions." Cale stepped forward just enough to subtly block the view of the room behind him. "The original fallback was compromised. I had to adapt. That's what I was trained to do." Larrick nodded slowly, but the sharpness never left his gaze. "Then I'm sure the data logs will clear everything up. We'll let you get back to your duties." The door hissed shut. Cale stood there, staring at it long after Larrick had gone. Behind him, Sarah remained quiet. She had heard everything. Her silhouette was half-shadowed in the room's dim lighting, her tail still curled around her legs. She didn't speak until Cale turned. "This was always going to happen," she said quietly. "The moment someone looked too closely." "Yeah," Cale said, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "And now they're watching every move I make." She stepped closer. "So what do we do?" He looked at her, then at the bed, then the chair, their little world, shrinking by the minute. "We can't slip up again. Not one mistake. No late conversations, no extra glances. No more touching." Sarah's jaw tightened, her ears pressing back. "You're asking me to pretend this means nothing. I'm asking you to survive." The words hit harder than he intended. For a moment, she looked like she might argue. But then her expression shifted, cold again, practiced. Royal. Her voice, when it came, was polished iron. "Very well. Captain Thorne will do his duty. And Lady Valari will act the part." But her eyes betrayed her. There was hurt there. Real and raw. Cale wanted to take it back. To pull her into his arms again, to whisper that he didn't care about Larrick, or Corvin, or the damn Accord's rules. But he didn't move. He couldn't. Because the moment he did, they'd both be lost. The days that followed passed with clinical efficiency. Sarah and Cale went through the motions, publicly poised, professionally detached. Their interactions were limited to mission briefings, daily security drills, and the occasional shared meal eaten in near silence. To the crew, they were the embodiment of discipline. Nothing more. But behind the mask, the silence screamed. Cale noticed it first in the way Syrah held herself differently. Her shoulders, once relaxed and regal, now carried tension like armor. She stopped brushing her tail when she sat. Her laugh, rare as it was, had disappeared completely. And she no longer looked at him. Not when he stood guard outside the council room. Not when they passed in the corridor. Not even when they shared quarters, her back to him on the bunk while he sat rigid in the chair, staring at the same data pad he'd read a dozen times before. He wanted to say something, anything, but every word felt like a step toward a cliff. One night, as the ship glided silently through open space, Cale stepped into the ship's mess hall. It was late. Few personnel lingered. He scanned the room instinctively, but it wasn't the crew that caught his eye. It was Commander Larrick, seated with a group of junior officers. Laughing, talking in hushed voices, and watching him. Cale pretended not to notice. He grabbed a ration pack, nodded to the kitchen AI, and turned to leave, but a voice stopped him. "Captain Thorne?" Larrick stood, his tone polite, but his eyes still sharp. "A moment if you don't mind." Cale turned slowly, shoulders squaring. "Something on your mind, Commander?" Larrick stepped closer, his smile cordial. "Just thought you should know, there's concern from High Command about the Valari delegation. Specifically, how secure our royal guest truly is." Cale didn't blink. "She's alive. Breathing. Safe. For now." Larrick's voice lowered. "But if she were compromised, emotionally or otherwise, could we count on you to be objective?" Cale's muscles tensed, but his face remained stone. "You think I'd endanger the mission? I think emotions cloud judgment." Larrick's eyes gleamed. "And you, Captain, have been getting very close to the storm." Cale stepped forward, inches away now. "You have something to say it." Larrick leaned in, voice a whisper. "One mistake, Thorne. That's all it'll take. One. And I'll be there to clean it up." With a final smirk, Larrick turned and disappeared into the hall, leaving Cale standing in the mess hall, the lights too bright and the walls too tight. When he returned to his quarters, Syrah was already in bed, facing the wall. Cale stood in the doorway for a long time before speaking. "They're closing in." She didn't answer. "I don't know how long I can keep this up." Still nothing. But just before he turned away, he heard her voice, soft and brittle. "I hate pretending I don't care." Cale closed his eyes. "So do I." He crossed the room and sat beside her, careful not to touch. Close, but not close enough. The space between them had never felt wider. 2 days later, the Vigilant Star arrived in orbit over the neutral world of Lasari Prime, a diplomatic staging ground where emissaries from all sides convened under fragile truces. Syrah was to represent her people in a closed-door session that would determine the balance of the war's next phase. The stakes were higher than ever. The pressure showed. As Syrah stood in front of the mirror, her orange fur brushed to a fine sheen, her ceremonial tunic hugging her form with silent authority, Cale watched from the corner of the room. He had stood guard for royalty before. But never like this. Never while carrying the weight of a secret that could destroy both of them. "Do I look like someone the galaxy will believe?" she asked, not looking at him. Cale hesitated. "You look like someone the galaxy fears." Her ears twitched. "Good." But her voice lacked conviction. He stepped closer, slowly, cautiously. "Syrah." Her name sounded foreign in the room, too intimate for a world that had forced them to speak in titles and protocol. She turned to him at last. Her golden eyes were filled with something raw. "I can't do this much longer, Cale," she whispered. "I wake up every day wearing a lie. For my people. For your mission. For the Accord. But I'm drowning in it." Cale's breath caught. She wasn't breaking. She was breaking open, the iron mask slipping to reveal the woman beneath the crown. "We'll find a way," he said, his voice low. "Even if it's just to steal a little more time." She took a step closer. The light caught her eyes, her fur, the soft rise and fall of her chest as her breathing quickened. Her tail curled inward, uncertain. I'm tired of hiding, she said. Tired of pretending we're not something more. Kale reached out, hesitated, then cupped her cheek with a calloused hand. Her fur was warm beneath his palm, her gaze unwavering. We are more, he said. But if we're not careful, they'll use that against us. I won't let them ruin you to get to me. A tear slipped down her cheek. You keep saying it's about protecting me. But what if I want to protect you too? His thumb brushed the tear away, slow and gentle. Then we protect each other. She leaned in, and this time, he didn't stop her. The kiss was soft, sorrowful, full of everything they hadn't been allowed to say. His other arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her into him. Her tail slid behind his legs like a tether. Her claws clutched the back of his uniform. And just as the moment reached its quiet peak, chime! The door buzzed. They froze. Kale pulled away, chest heaving. Sarah stepped back, smoothing her fur, her breath catching as she forced herself to regain composure. Kale opened the door. It was Larek. His eyes swept the room, lingering too long. Time to escort Lady Valari to the summit, he said, tone clipped. You're needed at her side, Captain. As always. Kale nodded once, his jaw tight. Sarah stepped forward, radiant again. Regal. As if nothing had happened. But Larek's smile said he saw enough. Too much. And Kale knew they were out of time. The summit chamber aboard Lasari Prime was a stark contrast to the dim warhalls Kale was used to. White marble walls veined with pale gold, artificial sunlight streaming through vaulted transparent steel arches, and security drones humming overhead like watching ghosts. Every faction had sent a representative. Only one truly mattered. Sarah. She stood at the center of the chamber beneath a glowing Valari crest, her orange-furred figure lit like a goddess cast from fire. Her words were steady, confident, her voice echoing across the room. The Valari people have no desire to see another star reduced to ash. But neutrality is not cowardice. We remain apart not because we are afraid, but because we remember. We remember what it costs to take sides. Polite applause followed. But Kale watched the faces, not the hands. Saw the Dominion ambassador lean back with a sneer. Saw Larek standing near the rear doors, arms folded, eyes never leaving Kale's. When the session recessed, Sarah approached him quietly, her tail brushing lightly across the polished floor. I said what I needed to say, she whispered. Kale nodded. You sounded like a queen. Her mouth twitched. I felt like a fraud. They walked together through the crystal-paneled corridors toward the diplomatic wing, two shadows drawn together by threads of war and yearning. But halfway down the hall, Kale's calm clicked. Thorn. Report to Conference Room 2 immediately. Security matter. Kale's spine stiffened. Copy. On my way. He looked at Sarah. Stay in the suite. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me. Her ears perked, concern in her eyes. What's wrong? Don't know yet, he muttered. But I don't like it. She nodded. Be careful. Kale turned and moved swiftly through the hall, his boots silent on the polished floor. When he entered Conference Room 2, the lights dimmed automatically. Larek was waiting. Alone. You said you had a security matter, Kale said. I do. Larek turned slowly, hands clasped behind his back. You. Kale didn't move. What are you talking about? The screen behind Larek lit up. Surveillance footage played. Grainy, but damning. Him and Sarah. That kiss. Her arms around him. His hands on her waist. Their faces pressed together like the war didn't exist. Kale's stomach dropped. Larek paused the footage. I gave you every opportunity, Thorn. But you just couldn't keep it professional. Kale's hands balled into fists. Where did you get that footage? Security feed in the diplomatic corridor. You got sloppy. Too many glances. Too much time alone. You broke protocol, Captain. And now. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You're going to resign your post. quietly. No scandal. No protest. Or this footage gets transmitted to every single Accord representative in this building. Kale stared at him. And if I refuse? Larek's smile was pure venom. Then Sira Valari becomes the face of scandal. The Dominion will eat her alive. The Accord will pull support. And you? You'll be court-martialed before the hour's out. Silence stretched between them. Kale's pulse thundered in his ears. He didn't speak. He turned, walked out of the room, and headed straight for the diplomatic suite. He had to tell her. He had to make a choice. The door to the diplomatic suite hissed open with a whisper of compressed air, and Kale stepped inside, his heart pounding hard enough to drown out his thoughts. Sira stood by the panoramic window, her silhouette framed by the planet's twin suns. The warm light bathed her orange fur and gold, catching in the strands of her long hair as it spilled over her shoulders. She turned at once, sensing his urgency. "What happened?" she asked. Kale didn't answer immediately. He locked the door behind him, walked straight to her, and stopped only when they were inches apart. "They have footage of us," he said, voice tight. "The kiss. Here. Just outside the summit chamber." Her golden eyes widened. She didn't ask how. She didn't need to. "Larek," she whispered. Kale nodded. "He's giving me a choice: resign quietly, walk away from you, or he makes it public. You get thrown to the wolves. Your people lose faith. The Dominion gains leverage." Sira's tail lashed once behind her before curling close to her legs. "So it was never about security. He wanted you gone from the start. He's a vulture. And he found the weakness in both of us." She stepped back, her arms folding across her chest, not coldly, but to keep herself from shaking. "So, what now? You walk away to protect me, and I pretend none of this meant anything?" Kale's jaw flexed. "I don't know. I don't want to. But if I stay, you'll pay the price." Sira looked at him, truly looked, past the soldier's discipline, past the scars, past the layers of duty. Her voice trembled, but it didn't break. "I would rather be ruined than lose you." Kale's breath hitched. "Don't say that." "Why not? It's the truth." She walked toward him, slow, deliberate, until her hands found his again. Their fingers intertwined. Her warmth anchored him. "I've been told what I must be for so long, Kale. A symbol. A diplomat. A perfect heir. But not once have I been allowed to choose. Not once have I done something that was mine, and mine alone." He said nothing. His throat was tight. "So let me choose now," she said. "I choose you." Kale's hands tightened around hers. "If we do this, if we face him head on, they'll come for both of us. Then let them." She leaned in, her muzzle brushing his cheek. "No more hiding. No more pretending. If this burns, let it burn." He kissed her fiercely. Not tender, not hesitant, but desperate, defiant. A kiss that said we are not afraid anymore. A kiss that said they will not break us. When they finally parted, Kale touched his forehead to hers. "I have a plan," he said quietly. "But we need to strike first. Then we do it together." Outside, Lissari Prime's ceremonial bells began to ring, summoning the delegates back to the summit chamber for the next session. Inside, two lovers turned rebels stood side by side, ready to face a galaxy that would try to tear them apart. Kale stood beside Sira at the edge of the council chamber, his uniform immaculate, his eyes steeled. He had memorized every detail of what needed to happen. There would be no second chances. Sira stood tall next to him, regal and radiant in her twilight-toned diplomatic tunic, but beneath the silks was armor, thin, light, laced beneath her robes. Not physical armor. Political. Emotional. What came next would either vindicate her or ruin her. The summit resumed beneath the high golden arches. The room buzzed with quiet tension as representatives from 12 systems took their seats. Admiral Corvin stood at the far end. Commander Larek flanked him. And Larek smiled. Kale ignored it. When Syrah stepped forward, the chamber fell still. She didn't read from a scroll. She didn't defer to her aides. She walked alone to the center of the marble floor, tail held high, every step purposeful. "I was meant to give you another speech today," she began, her voice calm but clear. "About neutrality. About tradition. About balance." She paused, letting her gaze sweep over them all. "But balance without truth is just silence. And I will not be silent anymore." Lerek leaned forward, frowning. Kale's eyes stayed fixed on the command console nearby. His thumb hovered over the signal trigger. "You see me as a figurehead," Syrah continued. "As leverage. As something that must be protected or manipulated. But I am not a bargaining chip. And the man beside me is not just a bodyguard." Gasps flickered through the room. "I love him," she said flatly. "And yes, we broke protocol. But not honor. And not our duty. He has protected me from assassins, sabotage, and betrayal." Her eyes landed on Lerek like a blade. "Especially betrayal." Kale triggered the signal. A second later, every screen in the chamber lit up, not with the kiss footage, but with another video. One Kale had recovered hours earlier from a deleted security node on Deck 6. The feed showed Commander Lerek in a maintenance corridor, meeting in secret with a masked Dominion envoy. Documents exchanged. Coordinates passed. Orders spoken. Real betrayal. The room erupted. Admiral Corvin barked orders. Lerek stood, face pale, reaching for the sidearm hidden beneath his coat, but Kale was already moving. He tackled the man across the table, slammed him into the marble, and pressed a cold barrel to his neck. Lerek didn't fight. He just laughed bitterly. "You fools have no idea what you've started." Kale leaned close, voice ice. "No. You have no idea what we're going to finish." Security dragged Lerek away. Syrah approached Kale slowly, her breathing shallow, her gaze locked on his. The chamber was chaos. But between them, there was only quiet. "You didn't have to risk that," she said. "Yes, I did," he replied. "Because I wasn't just protecting a mission." She reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. "You were protecting us." The delegates stared. The diplomats whispered. Some with outrage, some with admiration. But it no longer mattered. The secret was out. And they had survived it. In the hours that followed, the summit chamber became a hive of rapid decisions, furious whispers, and desperate damage control. The footage of Lerek's treason had spread like wildfire across Accord channels. Within the span of a single planetary rotation, the Dominion was publicly implicated in a targeted manipulation campaign. And the Valari heir, long treated as a symbol, became the story's anchor. But while politicians scrambled to spin narratives, Syrah and Kale sat in silence. They'd been escorted, politely but firmly, into a secluded garden chamber on the top floor of the summit spire. It was a small, private space, with flowering vines that twined up silver arches and wind chimes whispering softly in the breeze. Kale sat on a low stone bench, elbows resting on his knees, his hands clasped tightly together. "I expected them to be angrier," he muttered. "They are," Syrah said softly. "Just not at us anymore." She stood a few feet away, tail flicking lazily behind her as she paced the garden's inner path. Though still draped in her official robes, she'd undone the collar, letting the fabric fall a little looser around her fur. Her golden eyes were distant. "They're afraid," she continued. "Not just of war, but of what it means when one of their own chooses truth over tradition." Kale looked up at her. "You changed the game." She smiled, tired and fragile. "Only because you reminded me I could." He stood slowly, walking over to her. For a long moment neither spoke. The garden was so quiet it felt sacred. Like a space carved out of the chaos just for them. "You're still needed," he said. "Now more than ever. They'll want you to lead, more than before. You'll be the voice of neutrality with fire behind it. Someone who didn't just survive, but fought back." She nodded, though her expression faltered. And what happens to you? Cale exhaled, long and slow. I already submitted my resignation to Corvin. Sarah's ears flattened slightly. You what? He didn't argue. Said it was coming either way. She turned fully toward him, her jaw tight. Cale, you didn't have to do that. I could've. No, he interrupted gently. I wanted to. It doesn't survive in shadow. If I stayed your protector, it would always be a scandal waiting to happen. He hesitated, then added more quietly. And I don't want to be a ghost at your side. The words hung there, sharp and real. Sarah stepped forward. Her hands, those soft, furred hands with claws like fine glass, reached for his face. She pulled him down into a kiss that was slow and unhurried. It didn't burn like the first had. It warmed. When they broke apart, she whispered, Then don't be a ghost. Be something real. With me. Cale looked at her like he hadn't breathed in weeks. Wherever you go, you'll go too, she finished. And in that moment, it didn't matter what the galaxy thought. They had chosen each other. And together, they would choose what came next. 3 days later, the Vigilant Star departed Lissari Prime without Captain Cale Thorne aboard. He stood at the edge of the landing platform atop the summit's spire, his duffel slung over one shoulder, watching the sleek warship rise into the atmosphere, its engines carving contrails across the pale sky. Once, that ship had felt like home. Now, it felt like a door closing. Sarah stood beside him, wearing a new ensemble, a travel tunic wrapped in bronze sashes, light enough for mobility, regal enough to turn heads. Her fur glinted in the morning sun, her expression calm. But her hand found his without hesitation. You're quiet, she said softly. Cale shrugged. Was just thinking about everything we left behind. Sarah's tail curled around his leg. Then maybe it's time to think about what we're going to build instead. They walked together across the platform toward the waiting shuttle, not an Accord ship, but a private Valari transport. Sleek, agile, unmarked. Sarah had arranged everything. With Larak's betrayal exposed and the Dominion backpedaling in the political firestorm, her popularity among the Valari people had surged. But she had refused the crown, at least for now. I'll serve, she had told the council. But I will not be a prisoner to tradition. If you want a puppet, find another heir. They had wanted her too badly to argue. Now, instead of thrones and courtrooms, she had chosen to return home, to Saurian. Not as a ruler, but as a symbol reborn. And Cale would be at her side, not as a bodyguard, but as her partner. The shuttle's engines thrummed as they stepped aboard. Inside, the cabin was quiet, intimate. Cale sat across from her, their knees brushing lightly. He looked around at the polished wood paneling and curved metal design. I thought Valari ships were all ceremonial, he said. They are, she replied. Unless you ask for one built for two. He smiled. As the shuttle lifted off and veered away from Lissari's upper atmosphere, they watched the clouds fall away beneath them. Stars bloomed beyond the darkening veil of the sky. Sarah leaned her head on his shoulder, her voice quiet. You know they'll still talk. Let them, Cale murmured. They'll question your place beside me. They always will. She looked up at him, one brow raised. Still not afraid? He kissed her softly, lingering for a moment before pulling back just enough to whisper. Not as long as you're here. The stars ahead didn't care about politics. Or tradition. Or forbidden kisses in cold corridors. They were endless. Open. Waiting. And for the first time in either of their lives, Sarah and Cale weren't bound by duty or fear. They were bound by choice. By love. And by the vast horizon they would cross together. Saurian was not as Cale remembered from the reports. It wasn't the majestic, untouched realm the Accord files had painted, a world of serene skies, twin moons, and crystalline forests. It was alive. Wild. And bristling beneath its beauty with tension. The Valari capital, Veilhara, rose like a spiral of glass and stone from the jungle cliffs of the northern continent. Its towers gleamed under the crimson gold sun, but the streets below were restless. News of Syrah's return had stirred something volatile. Hope, certainly. But fear too. Not all the clans were pleased that the heir of fire had come back with a former Accord captain at her side. Syrah knew it before the shuttle even landed. As they disembarked onto the skyport balcony, she held Cale's hand tightly, her tail flicking in agitation behind her. She was dressed in her people's formal wear, woven amber sashes, light armor beneath, and a glimmering circlet of auric metal above her brows. Her fur had been combed and scented with desert spices. She looked like a queen. But not everyone bowed. The clan envoys waited in silence as she approached, 4 of them. Heads of regions not aligned with the central government. Their expressions ranged from cool civility to thinly veiled disdain. Lady Valari? One of them greeted with a nod. Elder Brannock, his fur a pale beige, his silver beard bound in leather cords. You've returned under unexpected circumstances. Cale felt the weight of their stares settle on him like lead. Syrah didn't flinch. I return as heir. And I return with truth. I expose the Dominion's corruption on Lasari. The Accord may be fractured, but our people still stand apart. That strength remains, if we stand united. Elder Merali, a lean, sharp-eyed female with dark fur and angular features, stepped forward. And what role does this human play in your vision of unity? Cale opened his mouth, but Syrah's voice sliced the air first. He is my bondmate. My protector. And the one who risked everything so I could bring the truth home. He stands with me, and by extension, with Saurian. Murmurs rippled through the crowd behind the envoys. Cale's heart pounded. He stood tall, his spine stiff beneath the ceremonial jacket he still wasn't used to. But he could feel the shift. Whispers. Doubts. Not outright rejection, but not embrace either. Brannock's eyes narrowed. You bring change, Lady Valari? Change often brings fire. Then let it burn away the rot, Syrah said simply. They stared at each other for a long, tense moment. Then Brannock gave a shallow nod and turned away, the others following. No applause. No cheers. Just the quiet sound of a new storm forming behind old walls. Cale exhaled as they entered the palace, its archways carved with ancient symbols, its halls lined with murals of warriors and stars. That could have gone worse, he muttered. Syrah smirked as her tail flicked against his leg. That was the easy part. He looked at her, concerned. What aren't you telling me? She hesitated. Then, quietly, I've been getting messages. Anonymous. Threats. Demands that I step down. Some call me Dominion-touched. Others say I've forsaken Valari blood by taking a human. Cale's fists clenched. We should have stayed on Lasari. We had to come home, she said. But home doesn't mean safe anymore. They reached her private chambers, more fortress than suite, and Cale checked the perimeter before locking the doors. She stood by the window, arms folded, gaze distant. This world doesn't know what to do with us. They'll either accept us, or try to tear us apart, Cale finished. She looked over her shoulder. Then let them try. Night on Saurian fell like a curtain of velvet and fire. The twin moons, one silver, one copper, cast long shadows through the garden terraces of the royal palace, where Syrah Valari had once played as a child. Now Cale moved silently through those same paths, his hand never straying far from the sidearm beneath his formal coat. Security had been doubled since they landed, but it wasn't enough. Not after the message slipped under their door. Traitor to blood. 1 moon cycle. Step down, or be silenced. It had been scrawled in red ink across a page torn from an old clan codex. A symbol marked the corner. 3 clawed lines across a black sun. Cale hadn't seen it before, but Syrah had gone still the moment her eyes landed on it. The Clawborn, she'd said. An ancient order. They believe purity of blood is the only path to strength. They vanished centuries ago, or so we thought. Cale had wanted to put her on the next shuttle off-world. She refused. So now he patrolled. And waited. The garden was unusually quiet tonight. Even the breeze through the crystal-tipped trees felt cautious. Cale's breath misted faintly in the air, the planet's cool night stealing warmth from his body but not his focus. Then he saw it. A shimmer. A movement. Just past the arched bridge that cut across the reflecting pool, near the base of the fallen star statue. Cale moved fast, silent, crouched, his eyes scanning for traps. There. A figure cloaked in Valari duskweave, meant to blur with the night. He could just make out the curve of a blade held low, ready to strike. And they were heading straight for Syrah's private quarters. Cale didn't shout. Didn't warn. He moved. With a burst of speed and force, he launched from the shadows and tackled the figure to the ground. The assassin was fast, inhumanly so, but Cale was faster. His elbow crashed into the attacker's temple as the blade flashed past his neck, grazing his collar. They rolled, and the intruder hissed, a sibilant, unnatural sound. Vulpine. Female. Orange eyes. Not one of Syrah's people. Modified. Cale drove his knee into her ribs, disarming her with a twist. She reached for another blade, but too late. He had his sidearm drawn and trained on her head. "Who sent you?" he growled. The assassin smiled with bloody teeth. "We are the true heirs. She is a false flame." Before Cale could react, she bit down on something hidden in her cheek. Her body spasmed, then went still. Dead. Cale knelt there for a moment, breathing hard, the silence around him colder now. He stood slowly, retrieving the dagger she dropped. It was inscribed with the same symbol as the threat note. He didn't return to the guard post. He went straight to Syrah. She was in her chamber, standing at the wide stone window that overlooked the capital. Her eyes met his as soon as he entered, and she knew from his face. "It started, hasn't it?" Cale nodded grimly. They were inside the palace. Armed. Trained. Modified. Syrah clenched her fists. "They'll keep coming. Then we stop playing defense," he said, stepping closer. "We find them. We end it." She looked up at him, the fire in her eyes no longer masked by diplomacy. "Together?" He reached out, brushing a lock of her dark hair from her face. "Always." But even as their foreheads touched, Cale's thoughts raced. The Clawborn weren't just saboteurs. They were cultists. And somewhere in the shadows of Saurian's fractured clans, someone was feeding them orders. The next day, the palace felt different. Tighter. Tenser. Eyes followed Cale and Syrah wherever they went, clan advisors, guards, even distant cousins of the court who barely acknowledged her name before. Word of the attempted assassination had leaked despite every effort to contain it. Whispers flooded the corridors. But worse than whispers were the silences. Syrah stood before the great council that morning, her orange fur lit by morning sun through the stained glass ceiling. She addressed them not with fury, but precision. Measured, calm, deadly. "The Clawborn are not myth," she said. "They have returned, and they walk among us." She held up the dagger Cale had retrieved. Gasps rippled through the chamber. "This symbol was found on the blade of an assassin inside this palace. While you debated the merit of my return, they slipped through our walls and tried to end what the Dominion could not." Brannock stepped forward, his old shoulders squared. "And what do you propose, Lady Valari?" "We dig them out," she said coldly. "Every clan. Every archive. Every shadow. We expose their network. I want names. I want their safe houses turned to ash." Some elders nodded. Others looked away. Afterward, in the private council chamber, Cale leaned close as they walked the hall. "We can't root them out without help. Your enemies won't act just because you demand it." "They will," Syrah said softly. "Because I'm going to give them someone to fear more than the Clawborn." Cale raised a brow. "I'm calling a conclave." His brow furrowed. "That's political suicide. You'd be putting all the clan heads in one place. If the Clawborn want to wipe your line out, let them try," she replied. "I'm done hiding in shadows." That night, While Kale reviewed maps and intercepted communication logs in their quarters, Syrah studied her clan's ancient scrolls, searching for any reference to the Clawborn's creed, history, or splinter groups. Hours passed. The wind howled outside the palace spires. Then something in one of the scrolls made her stop cold. "Kale," she said, her voice low. "You need to see this." He stood, crossed the room, and leaned over her shoulder. She pointed at a name inscribed in an old Valari dialect, now translated in her own hand. Torin Valari, exiled for purity doctrine, and banned from all bloodlines. Kale blinked. "That's your grandfather's brother?" Syrah nodded. "He vanished. No one ever confirmed where he went. But this scroll, it mentions him founding something called the Unbroken Flame. A secret faction that believed the Valari bloodline had been diluted by diplomacy. That only a return to wild dominance would reclaim our place in the stars." Kale's stomach twisted. "You think he founded the Clawborn?" She didn't answer right away. "I think the Clawborn aren't just cultists. I think they're kin. My kin." Kale exhaled sharply. "So this isn't just political. It's personal." She nodded. "I'm not fighting a faceless rebellion. I'm fighting ghosts from my own family." A soft chime echoed at the door. Kale approached cautiously, weapon drawn. The door slid open to reveal Elder Merali, alone, her cloak damp from night air, her face pale. "They know you're planning the conclave," she whispered. "They've already infiltrated 2 of the clans that pledged support." Syrah's eyes narrowed. "You knew where to find us." Merali nodded. "Because I was meant to stall you, but I won't. I have something you need to see." Kale didn't lower his weapon. "Why now?" "Because they're going to strike during the conclave. Not just at you, at everyone." "And who's they?" Syrah asked, voice ice. Merali's lips trembled. "Torin Valari is alive." Merali's words hung in the air like poison. Kale stared at her, hands still tight on his weapon. Syrah's breath caught in her throat. She took a step forward, slowly, her voice thin with disbelief. "Torin Valari died 40 years ago. My mother told me he vanished into exile. Disgraced, forgotten?" Merali's eyes, usually so sharp and calculating, were now glassy with dread. "He didn't die. He went underground. Built a following in the outer provinces, places where the clan rule faded, where purity doctrine still simmered in secret. He calls himself the Flame Unextinguished now. And the Clawborn? They answer only to him." Kale's jaw tightened. "And you've known?" "I suspected," Merali whispered. "But no one believed me. They said I was clinging to phantoms. But when you returned with a human at your side, when the symbol of the Clawborn surfaced again, I knew." Syrah turned toward Kale. "If it's true, he's not just a rebel. He's a claimant. A Valari by blood." Kale understood immediately. "And with your public bond to me, half the clans who already doubt your lineage might side with him." Merali nodded. "The conclave will draw him out. If he's alive, and bold enough to act, that's where he'll strike." Kale's mind ran like a combat sim. Corridor entries, guard rotations, possible safe zones. But there were no good answers. "Then we make the conclave a trap," he said. "Let him come. But we're ready for him." Syrah was silent for a long moment, standing near the window, staring out at the mist-covered capital. The wind tugged at the drapes like ghost fingers. "When I was a girl," she said softly, "my mother used to speak of Torin like a warning. Don't speak too loud or the Unbroken Flame will hear you. I thought he was a myth. A monster." She turned, her amber eyes glowing faintly. "Let's show him we don't fear monsters anymore." 3 days later. Location: the Conclave Hall of Saurian. The Great Hall of Banners had not been used in decades. Now, it was filled with light, armed security, and an uneasy mixture of respect and suspicion. The clans arrived one by one, leaders in ceremonial armor, advisors cloaked in silks and status, each bearing the sigil of their bloodline. each forced to face one another across ancient stone and gold. Syrah stood at the center dais, flanked by Cale on her right and the captain of her house guard on the left. Cale's eyes never stopped moving. The architecture was beautiful, vaulted glass, spiraled columns, and crimson banners flanking every pillar. But beauty meant danger. Too many angles. Too many hidden lines of sight. It felt like standing inside a throat ready to swallow. He leaned towards Syrah. "Any sign of him?" "Not yet," she murmured. "But if Merali was right, he won't let me speak without watching." Syrah stepped forward and raised her voice, calling the conclave to order. The chamber quieted. "I come not to command," she said, "but to unite. Saurian cannot afford another fracture. The Clawborn are real. They are organized. They mean to burn the clans from the inside out." A low murmur rippled across the gathered lords. "Some of you doubt me," she said. "Some of you question my blood or my bond. But I have bled for Saurian. I have faced death to bring truth to this hall. And yet you bring a human into our sanctum." A voice called. Heads turned. From the shadows near the back stepped a tall figure in obsidian armor. No guards had seen him enter. No banners had announced him. Cale stepped in front of Syrah instinctively. His sidearm was already drawn, his stance rigid. The man removed his helmet. He had Syrah's eyes. Only colder. Older. Sharper. "I am Torin Valari," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "And the line you claim to protect was never yours to command." The chamber erupted. Torin Valari stood beneath the ancient banner of Clan Saurian like a shadow made flesh, his obsidian armor gleaming in the pale blue light from the hall's high windows. Though older than Syrah by decades, his bearing was still powerful, his presence unmistakable. The resemblance between them was undeniable, same sharp jaw, same amber eyes. But while Syrah's gaze burned with hope, Torin smoldered with something far darker. Cale kept his weapon raised, even as dozens of clan guards stepped forward, drawing steel and shouting for calm. He felt the air shift around him, the tension of warriors on the edge of drawing blood. One wrong move, and this hall would become a tomb. Torin raised a single hand. "Peace," he said, the command rippling through the chamber like a chill wind. "I come not as a conqueror, but as truth returned." Syrah took one step forward, her voice cutting across the growing chaos. "You come cloaked in treason, Torin. In blood and threats. You are not truth. You are the sickness that hides behind purity." His smile was slow. Cruel. "You wear your mother's crown, niece, but not her strength. She knew better than to kneel before outsiders. She knew the blood of Saurian should never be diluted by off-world infestation." Cale didn't move. His grip tightened. "You speak of infestation," Syrah said, her tail flicking in restrained fury. "But you crawl from exile with cultists and assassins in your wake. Your legacy is a trail of corpses." "You mean clarity," Torin corrected. "For too long, the clans have grown fat and weak beneath the veil of diplomacy. We forgot who we were, until I reminded them." A dozen figures stepped forward from the crowd. Some wore clan colors. Others bore no insignia. Their eyes burned with the same zeal as Torin's. They drew concealed blades from their robes, curved and etched with that same black sun symbol. Cale reacted instantly. "Weapons! Now!" The chamber exploded into movement. Clan guards turned on each other, some confused, some traitors. Steel clashed. A blast from a hidden pistol rang out, shattering one of the stained glass windows above. Cale pulled Syrah behind the dais as three attackers lunged forward. His pistol barked twice, clean shots to the chest. One fell. The other scattered. Smoke filled the chamber. Screams. Chaos. Somewhere in the distance, emergency sirens began to wail. Syrah emerged from cover, snatching a spear from a fallen guard with practiced speed. Her robe tore at the hip as she moved, revealing the armored plating beneath. Cale stood beside her. Blood on his sleeve. Grit in his teeth. "We have to get out of here," he shouted. "No," she yelled back. This is my house. My court. If I run, he wins. Cale turned to her, eyes blazing. Then we end it. He swept his weapon across the chamber, firing 2 more times as attackers advanced on other clan leaders. Some of the delegates were retreating. Others fought back. A full-blown civil war was sparking beneath the vaulted dome of Saurian's greatest hall. Syrah locked eyes with Torin across the chaos. Face me! She shouted, her voice echoing like thunder. Torin smiled. Gladly. He stepped forward, drawing his own blade, long, ceremonial, black as volcanic glass. Cale turned to Syrah. If you go to him, I go too. She shook her head. This is a bloodline fight. Cale's voice dropped low. I don't care about blood. I care about you. For a moment, her expression faltered, softened. Then fight with me. Not behind me. Cale nodded once. Together they charged. The conclave chamber had become a crucible, stone pillars cracked, banners burned, and the air swirled with smoke, steel, and screams. What had begun as political theater was now all-out war. And at its core, 3 figures converging like planets on a collision course. Syrah moved like wildfire, her orange fur streaked with ash and her torn ceremonial robe flowing behind her like a war banner. She wielded the spear of her clan, not decorative, but real. Etched with her family's crest, it shimmered with kinetic charge as she deflected a claw-borne blade and spun low, sweeping the legs from her attacker before driving the spear through his chest. Beside her, Cale advanced with methodical brutality. His sidearm barked with every precise shot, dropping cultists as they surged from the chaos. He moved like a shield, never more than 2 steps from Syrah, intercepting every strike that veered too close, guarding her blind side with deadly intent. Torin descended the dais, slow and deliberate, his black glass blade dragging sparks from the marble floor. Do you feel it, niece? He called, his voice cutting through the battle like a blade. This is what Saurian was meant to be. A world of strength. No more masks. No more weakness. Syrah turned to face him fully, her spear raised. You talk of strength, but all I see is fear. You couldn't build anything, so you destroy. Torin snarled and lunged. The clash was instant. His blade crashed against her spear in a storm of sparks, the 2 of them locked in a brutal rhythm of blow, parry, and counter. He was stronger. Decades of hard survival had turned his muscles into coiled steel, but Syrah was faster. Sharper. Cale tried to intervene, but another wave of clawborns surged at him. He dropped his sidearm, it was out of power anyway, and drew a plasma combat knife. He moved through the attackers like a storm, cutting down the zealots one by one. A burn scorched his side, but he didn't feel it. All that mattered was her. Torin slammed Syrah against a shattered column, his blade inches from her throat. You don't belong here. He hissed. You gave yourself to a human. You shamed our name. Syrah bared her teeth. Then let me show you what shame feels like. She twisted, slamming the butt of her spear into his jaw. He stumbled back. She didn't give him time to recover. With a roar, she spun and drove the spear forward, through his armor, through his chest, pinning him to the dais behind him. He gasped, mouth open, blood on his lips. Saurian chooses its future, she said, her voice shaking. And it is not you. Torin's eyes glazed. The flame was extinguished. The chamber fell still. The remaining clawborn faltered, leaderless now. The guards rallied. Some cultists fled. Others surrendered. Cale limped toward her, blood soaking the left side of his uniform. She dropped the spear and caught him before he fell. You're hit, she whispered. Not badly, he grunted. You! She shook her head. I'm fine. We're fine. He looked into her eyes, those bright, furious eyes, and allowed himself the smallest smile. You were never meant to be anyone's symbol, he said. You were meant to burn. And now, she whispered, I get to rise from the ash. The fires in the great Hall of Banners had long since been extinguished, but their heat lingered in memory. The shattered pillars were left unrepaired for now, as a symbol, a reminder of what had nearly consumed Saurian, and what had been reborn from it. In the days following the conclave, the clans convened again. Not in war, but in peace. And this time, they listened. Torin's betrayal, the revelation of the Kilborn, and Syrah's victory in single combat had shattered generations of old doubts. The leaders who had once questioned her strength now stepped forward with bent knee and open hand. Syrah stood before them not as a princess or a pawn, but as the chosen matriarch of Saurian. Her voice no longer sought approval. It gave direction. There will be no more silence, she told them. No more whispers behind walls, or secrets carved in shadow. Our world is not pure. It is alive. And it will remain so, by our choice, together. Cale watched from the upper terrace, leaning on the balustrade. His injuries were healing, though slowly. His uniform had been replaced with a darker, sleeker outfit, something between ceremonial and practical. Something uniquely his. He wasn't just her protector anymore. He was her equal. Syrah joined him as the chamber emptied, her fur catching in the soft, golden light of Saurian's setting suns. She touched his arm gently. "It's done," she said. Cale looked at her, then at the horizon. "Not done," he replied. "Just beginning." They stood there for a long time, watching the sky. Peace was a fragile thing. Tomorrow would bring challenges, rebuilding, diplomacy, new threats beyond the stars. But they would face them together. Syrah leaned her head against his shoulder. "Stay," she whispered. "Not as a bodyguard. Not as an outsider. Just stay." Cale wrapped his arm around her waist. "I wasn't going anywhere." Years later, stories would be told across the Accord and beyond. Stories of the orange-furred matriarch who turned a dying world into a fire that lit the stars. Of the human who stood at her side, not above her, not behind her, but with her. Always. In the archives of Saurian, a new crest was etched above the great hall's entrance, a flame cradled by a hand. And beneath it, a single inscription, written in both their names. We chose each other. And in doing so, we chose peace.